Serious disagreements are expected from Washington today as G20 finance ministers meet to discuss the funding of any future government bailouts. Ahead of the talks, the IMF proposed 2 new global taxes on banks. And although the UK and other countries have welcomed the idea, Canada is firmly opposed. Critics of the plan claim that to get around the levy, banks will simply shift their borrowing and lending activity into other units such as hedge funds, and that would increase systematic risk. Let's get back to Jim Rogers, Chairman at Rogers Holdings, also with us today, Kirby Daly, Senior Strategist at the New Edge Group. Jim, we've been talking about this already this morning, financial reform, what it looks like. A tax on banks, on institutions. Canada is already dissenting at the blocks. Is this ever going to fly?
Something's going to fly. There's no doubt about it, because the public, inflamed by politicians or journalists or whoever, is after the financial district. So yeah, something's going. It's like the 30s again, Karen. I mean, everybody's down on the financial. We're in a period now where there's a big shift. You know, for the past 30 years, the financial area has been the center of power and influence. Now we're going to shift away from the financial district. It's going to go to the producers of real goods. Finance is not going to be a great place to be, because it's going to be under all sorts of attack, both fundamental attack, political attack, emotional attack. So you should become a farmer.
I think you've told us this strategy before, Jim, and it certainly seems to have a ring of truth when you look at all this intervention that's happening when it comes to institutions. Kirby, I was talking to some of the investors down this way today about the issue of a bank tax. Many haven't even begun to consider it. Is it something that, you know, investors are going to have to take on board?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be politically palatable, as Jim was alluding to as well, to try to get some of the money back. We're already making a big deal out of profits, you know, with creative accounting, how we're making profits on different parts of the bailout. Certainly a tax is going to be a great way for politicians to say we're getting our pound of flesh out of the banks. But what I was trying to allude to before, I've used that word 3 times, I apologize, is this. We are not addressing the core problem. We've moved away from what the core problem is that we were talking about a year ago and before that, is systemic risk. And by putting all of these new regulations on and trying to, again, go for a quick solution to say that, hey, we passed healthcare reform and now economic reform, banking reform, is probably not the right way. Go back to systemic risk, which I believe is the repeal of Glass-Steagall. Back to basics. Don't overload the system and the banks with regulation. Just separate out the systemic risk possibility and then let the markets play through. If there's no systemic risk involved, then you can let institutions who take too much risk that are not connected to the fundamental core banking system go down. And you don't need bailouts from the government that this bill is actually probably going to institutionalize.
Quick fix. How is this a quick fix? We've been doing navel-gazing for a couple years here. I mean, I mean, we're going back to this argument. We've had this conversation many times over the last couple of years. Banking for people. I mean, just basically you borrow you know, federal money at 3% and lend at 6%, and then iBanking, corporate finance should be completely partitioned out. Well, don't cross the lines? Is that what you want to go back to?
Before we repealed Glass-Steagall, we certainly didn't have anything on the scale that we had now. So it has to be looked at again. But the problem is the debate isn't there at that basic level. The debate is now about all kinds of other regulations and a way for it, politicians to say that they are getting, again, their pound of flesh back from Wall Street. And that is not going to be, it's not going to be good for Wall Street, but it's also not going to address the issue of systemic risk, which is what we need to stave off the next one, because the Fed and central banks around the world are certainly setting us up for the next one.
Kirby, the systemic risk in the system right now is in the sovereign debt. That's where the systemic risk is. When the UK or Spain or the US goes bankrupt, that's where the risk is. Sitting around here saying, oh, these bankers are causing all our problems. No, 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 no. Greece is bigger than nearly all the banks in the world. Spain, Portugal, the United States.
That. Exactly.
Well, that's where the risk is. We should be worrying about that instead of trying to focus attention on a bunch of bankers.
Thank you.
Who should have gone bankrupt, and next time let them go bankrupt. In the meantime, somebody better worry about the government spending.
Yep. Yeah, just quickly, Jim, if you've got a crowding out of debt by, you know, sovereign funds, and then you've got a bank tax for institutions, what happens to the cost of funding? Doesn't it have to go up?
Of course it has to go up, especially when you have these gigantic debts, you have this gigantic amount of money being spent, you have commodity prices going up, you have inflation, which is going to get worse. No, 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 I can paint you a very dire picture for down the road with the way things are going right now.